In this podcast episode, I'm going to talk about something different and very real, my personal experience of domestic abuse, why this is more common than many people think, and how to get help if you find yourself either in a situation where you're being abused or you're suffering from the after effects of an abusive relationship. Welcome back to the Smart Connector. Make sure to like and subscribe to my content if you enjoy this episode. And if you leave a review, that's a massive thank you, as this makes our content discoverable for a wider audience. So, this episode is on the theme of one of my favorite topics, call it passion if you like, which is entrepreneurial dating and relationships. Now, of course, abusive relationships can affect everyone. You don't have to be an entrepreneur or in a relationship with an entrepreneur to suffer the pain this causes. However, I believe entrepreneurs are especially vulnerable to difficult and dysfunctional relationships for two reasons. Oh, and first, this also goes for corporate high flyers, of which I was one. Your time, energy, and focus is often full on into your business or career. You're pedaling hard every single day to make things happen. And for this reason, you may simply not have the reflective bandwidth to realize what is actually happening to you until it's too late. And let me give you some examples. So, one male CEO I personally worked with ran an $8 million company and lived in a $2 million house. He had a wife who controlled all their finances and left a measly sum in the jar on the living room fireplace as his spending money every week. Now, this was a learned behavior from her northern UK roots, where men were met at the factory gates on a Friday and their wages taken off them by their wives so they couldn't disappear to the pub and spend the family housekeeping. Difference being, this was a different era, and she was married to a CEO, not a factory worker. And she used to kick him in the head when he was driving in front of her children, too. Another man I knew had a wife who stopped all work in the house and with the children the second he came home from work and insisted he did bath time, bedtime, and cooked the evening meal while she put her feet up in front of the TV because she was exhausted from looking after the kids all day. She didn't work outside the home, but she went out spending his money and shopping and partying every weekend with her friends, leaving him without the opportunity to take care of his health and well-being or pursue meaningful hobbies, or even have a bit of man to man downtime with friends after a really tough week at the helm of his company. I don't think that's very fair, do you? Now, Jason, who I interviewed for my podcast a while back, suffered physical violence, extreme jealousy, and financial exploitation, and an ability to choose how he spent his time. Thankfully, he has a lovely partner now, and his scars are healing. Now, if you're in a startup situation or if your business is struggling, you may look to emotional and practical support from your partner. When you're in a relationship with the wrong person, this can be the trigger for some seriously bad behavior to occur. Because when selfish and entitled people feel they're having to compromise some aspect of their lifestyle to support someone else's goals and dreams, they really don't like it. You may find, for example, someone who supported you when the going was good becomes mean, spiteful, and judgmental when the money dries up. This is often the excuse for them having affairs or absenting themselves in other ways, like neglect and abandonment through their withdrawal of affection, physical presence, and time. Of course, a lack of money puts all relationships under strain, and conflict, distance, and disappointment can be natural consequences of this. But abuse is different. It's a consistent pattern of inflicting pain and suffering on another. And make no mistake, in your heart, you will know if you're with an abuser or just someone who no longer feels aligned with you. There really is a huge difference. So we've talked about men, but let's talk about women now. So women are three times less likely on the whole to run businesses, and they occupy only 20% of board seats globally. So often when they do, they find themselves in the minority and surrounded by men. And this means they're far less likely to have female support. And while it's always lonely at the top, it can be really lonely for women. Now, men are just as likely as women to be exploitative and manipulative. It's very common for them to look for high flying women to bankroll their lazy lifestyle. Busy women, especially if they're single parents, as I was, lack time to look for love. And through loneliness, they can be very, very vulnerable to love bombing and miss the signs that they're becoming a target for someone toxic. And also, because high flying women are smart as well as powerful, one of the best ways to maintain a one-way exchange of value is through abuse. So, when those bad guys move in on your life, they'll ensure they maintain a one up position through practicing many of the tactics I'm going to look at shortly. Now, you may not consider yourself a high flyer. Perhaps as a female, you've just come out of a stint caring for your children and just getting going again with your business. Now, at times like this, the character of your partner really counts. Partners who have yours and your children's interests at heart will encourage, support, and even work themselves to help you get your business off the ground. They won't put pressure on you to bring in income from day one, and they'll be proud that you found a fresh purpose and direction. On the other hand, selfish and entitled narcissists will resent any time you spend getting your business going. Pure and simple, any activity you engage in should result in one of two outcomes. Either you're directly serving them or you're exchanging your time for money. There really is no room for any other option in their minds. It's like a pimp mentality, if you like. Now, before we go further, I also wanted to say that I'm not a qualified psychologist or mental health practitioner. The views expressed in this episode are purely my own and don't constitute professional advice. If, however, this resonates with you, and if you're an entrepreneur who wants to surround yourself by those who lift you higher, reach out and ask about my elite one-to-one coaching because I love to help entrepreneurs get back on track to build not just the business, but also the life they truly deserve. Now, the power of connection is the anti abuse weaponizer. And here's why. Connection is strength. And when abuse happens, there's a triple bond that is broken, which is firstly our own connection to and confidence in ourselves. Secondly, the connection we have to others weakens because abuse can't take place when we have a really solid circle of support around us. Because this same circle would just come along and lift us right out of that miserable situation, shutting the door firmly in our abuser's face. Thirdly, the connection to many gets lost, and that's our rightful place in the wider communities we inhabit. When we're struggling with abuse, we lose our will to show up with strength and power. We become like a shadow of our former selves, which impacts our business or career performance, as well as many other aspects of our life. So, what we're going to look at next is how and why abuse happens, what abuse actually looks like, how to get help if you're experiencing abuse, and why I truly believe I will never be a victim of abuse again. Now, my goal here is to help people through this who may be questioning whether what they're experiencing is actually abuse, as well as those who are crystal clear that they are or have been in an abusive relationship and who are looking for some identification, validation, and maybe a way out of their suffering. Now, it's important to remember that all of us are capable of behaving badly at times, and that isn't abuse, unless it's a consistent and predictable pattern linked to power and what's called coercive, in other words, forced control of another. So bear this in mind. Survivors of domestic abuse often hide away because they feel marginalized, judged, and ashamed. All around us, every day, there are people going about their daily business who are having a horrible time at the hands of their partner, walking on eggshells, waiting in fear for the next onslaught, and being stolen from and ripped off in every way imaginable. Now, if that's you, you're not alone. There are also many people, including me, who will believe your story without placing any blame or judgment on you because they've gone through or seen something similar and they know the reality of abuse. It's not six of one, half a dozen of another, as people often say out of pure ignorance. In abusive relationships, it goes way beyond this unhealthy dynamic. There really are perpetrators and victims, and by the end of this podcast episode, you'll be a lot clearer about who and what these look like. If you're currently in an abusive relationship and you need help to understand what's actually going on rather than what your abuser is telling you about yourself, this will hopefully encourage you to seek help or just leave. If it also helps you own and express your history, well, that's the best way to combat toxic shame, which is the deep and powerful shame others carry and seek to transfer to you through their own shameful actions. Now, this doesn't mean you need to be perfect, far from it. You may have behaved badly at times because being abused brings out the worst in many people. Maybe there were aspects of your own behavior that could also have been called abusive. However, when you find yourself in a better place and see things more clearly, you will often realize that the intolerable situation you were in led to you behaving uncharacteristically and defensively. Personally, I've always been a really kind and caring person with high integrity, and some of the ways I behaved when I was with my abuser was out of character. I was quiet, sad, and withdrawn for the most part, but occasionally I would become deceptive and a little manipulative, which is completely opposite to my usual and preferred open and direct communication style. Now, I used to feel really bad and guilty about this at the time, but I later realized, and with the help of a great therapist, that this was in response to my fear of speaking up and saying what I really thought and felt, because that would have unleashed a barrage of rage against me. I walked on eggshells, and some of the ways this manifested was by being untruthful because I was telling my abuser what he wanted to hear rather than what was really going on and what my true thoughts and feelings were. Does that make sense to you? Okay, so let's now smash 5 myths around domestic abuse. First, that a lack of physical violence means abuse isn't going on. Now, my heart goes out to anyone who has been in a physically violent relationship, as it must be terrifying and dangerous. However, that was not my experience. Emotional abuse can also be extremely traumatic and distressing. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me is a terrible saying. Words can and do hurt, and the way they're delivered can hurt too. So let's stop pretending that any form of emotional abuse is justified. It really isn't. Secondly, but men do not suffer abuse. Men as well as women experience abuse, as the only requirement is to be in a relationship with a mentally unstable individual. We do know, however, from statistics that men are overwhelmingly the perpetrators in physically violent relationships. However, it's been estimated that 1 in 6 men, that's 16%, have experienced partner emotional abuse, with 5.2% being abused right now by a current partner and 12% by a previous partner. And this contrasts with 1 in 3 women, that's double the number, or 35.6%, who have been emotionally abused by a partner. And this means that women are roughly twice as likely to experience intimate partner abuse. So that's 1 in 3 women. That is a lot of women, and most of them are not speaking up. I know many men who've suffered abuse from their partners and wives, and I don't want to invalidate their experience. In fact, they need even more help and support in some instances to leave, because it's deeply ingrained in some men to be strong and not to ask for help when they need it, which is also a contributing factor to the higher rates of male depression, suicide, and addiction. Now, third myth I want to bust is that abuse is rare. Surveys have shown that 8.9% of men are physically and emotionally abusive, 4.7% are physically abusive only, and 25.8% are emotionally abusive only. That's 1 in 4. And if anybody thinks that can't possibly be true, well, it's because most people feel a lot of shame by allowing themselves to be abused. And it therefore goes underreported and under the radar, and many perpetrators get away with it because they know this. Fourth myth I want to smash is that abuse is linked to alcoholism or drug addiction. Although alcoholics certainly can be and often are abusive, not all are. Cruelty and rage can be addictive too. They're what's known as process addictions, behaviors that cause a feel good rush in certain individuals. Abusers often choose not to modify their behavior for this reason. They get a payoff when they start to abuse in the form of a release from pain and the sense of offloading it onto another. This, if you like, is their drug of choice. Fifth, that abuse is a lower class thing. A lack of money is, of course, stressful, and as the divorce statistics show, when this is the case, relationship conflict is much more likely to happen. However, arguments are not the same as abuse. Arguments can have positive outcomes, and there's nothing wrong with expressing emotions like anger, frustration, and pain. However, when that's used to cause intentional harm to another, it tips over into abuse. It really is important to remember that, like addiction, abuse can be found in the wealthiest of homes as well as the poorest. So, now let's go on to look at the 5 signs of emotional abuse. And I'm focusing on this rather than physical violence as it reflects my own experience. Now, the first sign is drama, and by that I mean an unwelcome and intrusive lack of peace. If someone is a constant source of upset into your life, in other words, if their actions are pulling the focus from you fulfilling your purpose and going happily about your day to day work, that is a major red flag. Now, drama can be anything like someone making a huge deal out of something others would be relaxed and easygoing about, to engineering family relationship or financial strife. Anything really to keep you disturbed, off balance, and focusing on the more positive and life affirming things that many people take for granted. Alongside this drama can also come intermittent reinforcement and the kind of gestures you crave, buying you gifts and flowers, offering compliments, and deep and heartfelt apologies for the terrible behavior that you've had to experience. And by this time, your soul is so starved, you ignore what you know to be true, that this is just a temporary respite to keep you hooked like the eye of the storm before everything starts up again. The second sign of emotional abuse can be someone seeking to control your time, and this is often linked to the drama because drama is a massive time suck. When you're in a relationship with an abuser, you'll find your focus constantly being pulled from things that matter to you. Instead, you'll find your time spent serving their needs in some way. Their goal is to ensure you don't have the time or the space to decide what's best for you and act on it, because secretly they believe they're worthless and they fear that once they give you this time and space, you'll realize this and leave them. Now, this, of course, can have a hugely detrimental effect on your business or career. Entrepreneurial or professional high flyers need peace and support to do their best work. And it's really hard to do well when there's someone in the background who's doing their best to drag you down. The third sign of emotional abuse is when someone seeks to control your money. An emotional abuser can be financially reckless or chaotic. They may earn at a minimum level and try to extract every last penny from you until you have nothing left and are in such crippling debt that it will take you a lifetime to escape from. Or they may be very controlling around money, and even if they have wealth, they may make sure your access to it is limited and that every purchasing decision is made by them, leaving you with no power or control over your destiny. The fourth sign of emotional abuse is seeking to destroy the bond you have with people close to you for obvious reasons. Abusers will make it difficult and uncomfortable for you to spend time with family and friends. They'll often be rude and unpleasant to the people you care about while being gracious to their own family and friends. Gradually, those people you care about will distance themselves from you as they know you come as a package with someone mean and nasty. This makes the abuser very happy. Of course, they would prefer you not to have support around you as it gives them more power. The fifth sign of an emotional abuser is criticism, insults, and name calling. Remember, emotional abusers may be very charming to their own family, friends, and colleagues and fool everyone, but behind closed doors, they can be exceptionally nasty to you. They can scream in your face for hours, issue the worst kind of threats they can dream up, and show the kind of behavior that would be extremely shocking for civilized, normal people to witness. Or they can ignore you to the point you feel invisible, starve you of love and affection, and make you feel as interesting and worthwhile as a worm, literally for years on end. This is never about you. Although you may be so worn down by the behavior that's leveled at you that you may believe it's justified. It's important to realize that abusers hate themselves, and their abuse is an attempt to transfer the pain of that hatred, that self-hatred, to you. Unfortunately, this often means they get bolder over time and the abuse escalates. So, later in this podcast, we're going to look at how to escape such a relationship if you decide you can't at this present time, how to minimize the impact of your abuser's actions on you. But before, let's look at a question people often ask me, which is how to spot signs of abuse in others. Now, the truth is, abuse can be hard to detect. Aside from broken legs, black eyes, bruises, and so on, obvious physical injury, abuse can be very hard to spot. Most physical abusers will cover their tracks, so unless they're really out of control, they'll hurt their victims where it can't be seen. And as we've seen already, emotional abusers can appear very charming and convincing to the outside world, unless the outside world consists of your support network, in which case they will often be very unpleasant and rude. Victims of abuse will put on a brave face and you'll even see a smiley, happy side to them. This is because usually they are relieved to be spending time with you instead of their abuser. Also, they may be in denial about how bad the abuse is because it is extremely painful to face up to. With me, for example, I would often tell myself a story which would go something like this. He's having a hard time right now, and things will improve. He's frustrated and upset, and because of his childhood trauma, he struggles to manage his emotions. If I just ride this out, things will improve, and we'll get back to that happy place, just like when we fell in love. Now, what I realized eventually was that the happy place that I was fooling myself we would get back to was just the act that he was putting on in the first instance to trap me. So I was in love with the person I thought he was, but really he never was that person because he was in so much internal pain. He wasn't even capable of love. His talent was to use people instead. How and why I believe this to be true would require a really long explanation and a list of all the books and resources I consumed and all the therapy that I had to fully understand and come to terms with my own situation. So it's not one I can go into here, but I'm telling you this to warn you against the magical thinking that so often accompanies a decision to stay and ride things out instead of leave. Now, if you've never been through something similar, victims of abuse may also fear your judgment. So even if your relationship with them is a close one, they may not confide in you or tell you the truth. So let's revisit this checklist to identify whether you're in an abusive relationship currently. I invite you to ask yourself, is your partner attempting to control aspects of your life, for example, your money, time, or relationship with others? Do they behave in a way that benefits them while hurting you? Do they frequently belittle or criticize you or behave as if you're invisible and of you no worth at all? Is their behavior random and unpredictable in a bad way? Obviously, no one minds unpredictable, random acts of generosity or kindness, right? Do they fly into rages, sulk, or give you the silent treatment? Now, this is a big one for men who have been conditioned to expect emotional or so called hormonal outbursts in women. Do they also do things that make you see their wonderful side? Remember, this is a tactic to keep you hooked. If any of this resonates, there's something important I want you to know. Abusers are emotionally dysregulated and always will be. They experience constant internal pain, which on the one hand you may sense and be driven to solve, until you realize that no matter what you do, this makes them incapable of loving you. Now, occasionally they may realize the errors of their ways and seek help. Mostly, however, abusers will just get better at practicing their craft so they can achieve that power driven payoff. Rather than fixing themselves, they will continue to minimize your achievements, ridicule your dreams, and try to leave you feeling as though everything you care about and stand for is worthless. So, your only true goal, if you are in a relationship with an abuser, should be to plan and execute your escape. Now, personally, I was vulnerable to abuse because I grew up witnessing and experiencing abuse. My family was far from normal, and I carried this blueprint into adulthood. I didn't have a supportive family. I didn't have parents who were really involved in my life from an early age. And I experienced an awful lot of emotional as well as practical neglect. Because I had never experienced the power of unconditional love, I truly believed the only way to get it was I had to earn it. And that set me up for some very unhealthy relationships. And finally, the choice to commit to my abuser, even in the face of some early evidence that he was not a man who would love me in the way I would have wanted. Now, people abuse or choose abusers like me for many of these reasons, and because they have unhealed trauma. Abusers are often sociopaths who lack conscience, which apparently stands at 4% of the population, and really they're best avoided as they rarely change. Now, another question that I'm often asked is why don't people leave abusive relationships and why didn't you as soon as the abuse became obvious? Okay, so here are the three reasons why. The first is economic entrapment. Since money is used as a weapon of control in abusive relationships, the abuser will do things that make it very difficult for you to walk away. This consists of things like running up debt or transferring debt to you, controlling access to funds, or out of control spending so you struggle to fund your path to freedom. The second is children, and this is a really big one. Men, especially, are scared to lose their influence and role as a full time father, and they'll often put up with ongoing abuse from their partners or wives in order to avoid this. Because they're men, they know that a good stepfather is a rare breed, and they worry that an adult man entering their children's lives as a live in caregiver puts them at risk of abuse. And this is a real and very understandable fear, which is borne out by statistics. And here's the shocking evidence: child abuse is 40 times more likely when single parents find new partners. When children live in homes with unrelated adults, they are nearly 50 times as likely to die of inflicted injuries as children living with two biological parents. Also, 17% of women who had stepfathers in their childhoods have been sexually abused by them, compared to only 2% of those with biological fathers. Now, that's not to say that wonderful stepfathers don't exist, but it is by no means a given. Also, when women behave in an abusive way to their partners, they're sometimes abusive to their children too. And abused men can feel as though they are the only consistent and loving presence in their children's lives. And all of this means a lot of abused men with children are willing to sacrifice their own happiness and well being to protect them. Now, the third reason people stay in abusive relationships is the trauma bond. And this is an emotional attachment which develops out of a cycle of abuse devaluation and positive reinforcement. So it's kind of an up and down thing. Of course, not all abusers will show kindness and care. Some will just be downright nasty always. But many alternate their awful behavior with behaviors that make you feel as though they do really love you underneath it all. Little gestures of kindness, gifts or words of appreciation, a shared joke, or even a humble and sincere apology for all the distress they've caused. Now, it's only natural to develop a bond with someone who treats you with kindness. Many abusive relationships begin with those generous gestures and declarations of love. It's called love bombing. And then once the abuser has secured their place in your life, this becomes a bait and switch, with the worst of them appearing far more often than that kind and loving person you thought you knew. When love is only granted inconsistently, unpredictably, and occasionally, it turns into an emotional roller coaster, which in itself gives you a high. Using an analogy, when you've been starving and someone places a feast in front of you, your appreciation of that food will be intense, right? Far more intense than if you've had a fully stocked fridge that you could eat from whenever you felt like it. So, with this intermittent reinforcement, you get an unhealthy hit that's similar to the hit your abuser gets when he or she is inflicting their cruelty. Because victims know at some level they're being manipulated, and this is also a major cause of shame. And it's called codependency, and it's one reason why they tend to stay instead of go. Now, I learned from a neuroscientist that when our brains contemplate change, which we humans resist, we have a tendency to minimize the bad and overemphasize the good. And the trauma bond leads us to tell ourselves that the good times are being balanced out by the bad. However, if you were to track and monitor your day to day mood and experience of living with abuse, you would generally find that the misery and pain far outweighs the impact of any of those random acts of kindness and fair. And I think it's important to remember that. So, the final topic we're going to look at in this podcast is whether you should stay or go. And if so, what's the best way to do this? Now, a decision to leave an abusive relationship can't be taken lightly when children are involved. Sometimes people will decide to stay for reasons that make a lot of sense to themselves, but not others. I know for myself, for example, I decided to stay when I could have left because my children were young and I couldn't face the upheaval for either myself or them. I managed the abuse, if you could call it that, in private. And like many loving and responsible parents, I tried to shield my children from the impact of that. Was that the right thing to do? I think the answer was yes at the time. Was I also mistaken in thinking that I could shield my children and they would not be traumatized from the abuse they witnessed and experienced too? Yeah, it was wishful thinking for sure. But leaving would have been traumatic too. It was a catch-22 situation, which became much clearer and more straightforward over time. I knew there was a time that would come when I could escape, and although I did love my abuser, or at least I thought I loved the man I believed my abuser to be underneath it all, I knew that if his behavior didn't change, I was going to be out of there when the time was right. Perhaps you feel the same. The important thing is to prioritize your own well-being and build a circle of support for yourself. And remember to reach out to me if you'd like some one-to-one coaching to help you achieve this. So, how can you escape from an abusive relationship if this is something that you've decided to do? So, first, get support from people who really understand. I personally love the 12-step mantra: I didn't cause it, I can't control it, and I can't cure it. This hands the responsibility for the terrible behavior of your abuser right back to them and gives you the freedom to make your exit. Remember, you can't fix an abuser. They have to want to fix themselves. And since most of them don't, the best way out is often to leave. But by the time you are ready to leave, you will usually be at a very low point. It's common for the abuser to have taken everything they can from you, including your self-worth and respect. You may have no money or be in debt. Your friends and family may have drifted away because your partner has driven a wedge between you. Your first and most important task in this instance, therefore, is to get a support team in place, practical as well as emotional. Secondly, you need money. Now, fortunately, this was not my issue at the time, and it made it easier for me to get away and establish a new life. If I had to go back, though, and I didn't have money, I would just make it my priority to get some by whatever means I could, as long as it was ethical and above board and didn't hurt anybody else in the process. Third, you need a plan that is smart. In other words, specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, and time bound. Set a date, get the help, and ensure you're not alone. If you are an entrepreneur or professional high flyer who is currently experiencing the issues that I've talked about in this podcast episode, or if you've experienced them in the past, I really hope this has been helpful to you. Keep coming back for more. Like and subscribe to my podcast, and remember to reach out if you'd like a confidential chat about how we can work together and how I can help you achieve the business and life of your dreams. Thanks for listening, and see you soon.